Hello and a warm welcome to a short lecture on writing your psychological essay, which is your second assignment in Psych 101. I'm going to run through what's required for your essay and give you some tips on how to achieve this. But before we begin, I wish to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of the land on which we live, work and play, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So in this lecture we're going to look at what you are required to do for this assessment. We're going to look at the essay question and what this means for you to evaluate the major types of motivation, that is the essay topic. We'll have a look at self-determination theory and with a short video that may help to clarify the topic. We'll have a look at how to approach the essay topic with a critical mind and in turn develop an argument and structure your essay. With this in mind, you'll need to present your argument in a clear, concise written format, and this entails a set of skills that helps your reader to understand what you're trying to say. You'll need to present your writing in APA 7 formatting convention, and again there are rules and skills involved here. We'll go through those. Lastly, there are people employed at UNE whose job it is to help develop all these skills. And this is a free service and you can check in with these people, the academic skills team, anytime you need some help with your written assignments or exam preparation. So we'll go through that too. Okay, first up, the requirements. And I covered most of this in the welcome lecture, so I'm going to skim a little bit here. Okay, first of all, the psychological essay is mandatory to complete for you to pass Psych 101. It's worth 35% of your overall unit mark, and the topic is motivation and emotion. Your essay should be 1,500 words plus or minus 10%, so that means 1,350 to 1,650 words. It covers the learning outcomes 2, 4, 5 and 6, and I'm going to read these. Number 2 is to apply the concepts, language and major theories of the discipline to explain psychological phenomena with the ability to communicate this effectively to others. So you've got to write what you think so that other people can understand. Number 4 is to analyse and critique theory and research in the discipline of psychology and communicate these in written format. Again, there's the written format. 5 is to demonstrate foundation knowledge of appropriate values and ethics in psychology. And 6, correctly employ the American Psychological Association structure and formatting conventions. So that's APA 7. We'll cover that. Most importantly, your essay is due on the 2nd of May at 1 minute to midnight. Before we delve into the essay task, we first have a background situation about Tara Tucker, who is starting university and taking Psych 101 this trimester. She has good intentions to do well and is working hard. We're told that her motivations to do well include to please her parents by achieving a high grade, and in doing so she'll receive a new iPhone. But she also wants to do well to feel good about herself at the end of the trimester and in turn avoid feeling inadequate and ashamed. But Tara wonders if other motives would be better than the ones she currently has to do well in Psych 101. And she also wonders if the knowledge gained by motivation researchers might have the answer. For your assignment, you are asked to address Tara's question by writing a psychological essay that will evaluate how effectively the major types of motivation outlined by self-determination theory will help Psych 101 students to perform well. So let's break this task down a bit. Your writing guide on page 63 defines the term evaluate as to weigh up the worth of something and reach a definite conclusion. It's more than describing several sides to an argument. Rather, you are asked to judge their merits and put forward your own opinion. In this case, you will apply this evaluation to the major types of motivation outlined by self-determination theory and base this on empirical articles from the motivation literature. You'll also apply this evaluation in relation to Psych 101 students, like all of you here studying psychology in Psych 101. To evaluate a topic or concept, it's important to first understand it. And to help you with this, you have a background reading by the authors of self-determination theory, Ryan and Deci. The title is Intrinsic and Extrinsic Motivation from a Self-Determination Theory Perspective, Definitions, Theory, Practices and Future Directions. Please use this article to get to grips with what the theory says about the major types of motivation. You can then use it in your essay to introduce the topic, highlight the broad relevance of the topic to Psych 101 students, and define the key concepts and terms used in self-determination theory. In essence, it sets the background within which you will then examine your 3 chosen empirical articles. That is to critically evaluate their findings and draw a conclusion based on them. You will then present your argument in the form of a psychological essay. Now, sometimes I detect a little confusion about what the major types of motivation are, so I draw your attention to the figure 1 of Ryan and Deci's article. The figure is titled Self-Determination Theories, Taxonomy of Motivation, which basically means types of motivation. There along the top you can see the column called motivation, and this ranges from amotivation to extrinsic motivation, and then finally intrinsic motivation in that continuum order. I know Nicola talked about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in her lecture, so I do urge you to go back and listen to this again. But also dip into your textbook on pages 623 to 625. It gives an overview of self-determination theory. And with a more basic overview of the theory, you can then go back to the background article and things will start to slot into place. I also detect a little confusion about how the 3 basic needs relate to the types of motivation proposed by self-determination theory. These, of course, are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. To help with this, I found a very clear explanation of this interaction from Edward Deci himself, who is, as we know, one of the authors of the theory. Now that you begin to understand the nuts and bolts of self-determination theory, you have a framework within which to start reading the 5 empirical articles provided for you. Down the line, you will select 3 of these articles, which together will start to build a logical response to the essay task, that is, to evaluate how effectively the major types of motivation outlined by self-determination theory will help Psych 101 students to perform well. Your companion text, an interactive approach to writing essays and research reports, is going to be your best friend here. In particular, the chapter on critical thinking. If you haven't got a copy of this text, you can find it in the unit reading list and download some of the sections that you need. I'm not going to go through this chapter and spoon feed the information for you. You're self-directed students and can read it for yourselves. I'll just say that this section, Interpret and Evaluate the Research Evidence, has 5 main components, and I think Wendy covered most of this in the last part of her Research Methods Lecture 2.3. So I'll just say here that the first part of this section is done for you because all the articles are peer-reviewed and empirical. That is, they report results of research studies that have been reviewed by other experts in the field. The second point is analyse the arguments and what point the researchers are making and how did they explore this, which leads you to examine the methodology. What did the researchers find, and does this make sense? And finally, what did the researchers conclude from their results? How does this all fit into A, what you understand about self-determination theory, B, what the other empirical articles you've chosen found, and C, don't forget to consider how this may apply to the population we're considering here, that is Psych 101 students. While you read, interpret and evaluate the information in your empirical articles, you'll want to make some notes. Try to do this in your own words so you don't risk writing the same sentence as in the article and inadvertently plagiarize. Also, when you're writing, jot down where you read it and on what page. This helps if you need to come back to the point again, maybe to clarify the meaning or find more information. Once you gather more and more information, you'll want to start organizing it into some coherent order, which is where a mind map is very, very handy. If you look at the internet, you'll find hundreds of examples of mind maps, so choose which one will suit you, or maybe try a few different styles until you find a good fit. I chose this one because it's the most similar to the one I've used over the years because it works for me. In the centre spot, I always write the essay task or question, and that way it's always front and centre and helps me stay on track. Again, I'm going to refer you to your textbook, An Interactive Approach to Writing Essays and Research Reports. Remember, it's your best friend for now. Chapter 4 on essays will take you through all the component parts of the psychological essay you'll write. It also does a good job on explaining how to organise your information and develop an argument. Basically, you will need to create a title page, an abstract, introduction, essay body, and conclusion. See also your marking criteria document in the psychological essay information in the assessment tile in Moodle. Print this out and have it on your desk while you write, because this marking criteria is the same checklist your marker will use to award you the marks and give you feedback. This mind map is what I call my essay spider, because it has a central body part where I would write the essay task or question and a number of legs, each of which represents a separate component of the essay. And by the way, my spider sometimes has 8 legs, but more often than not it's missing 1 or 2, and sometimes it boasts an extra few. I like the way this particular mind map spider has different colour legs depending on which part of the essay the leg belongs to. The body of the essay comprises 3 blue legs that each becomes a paragraph. Note that these paragraphs have a topic sentence and evidence written next to them, and this signals that paragraphs should hold a particular structure. In most cases, the first sentence of a paragraph is the topic sentence. This states briefly what the paragraph will be about in broad terms. From a good topic sentence, you should be able to predict the content of the paragraph. The topic sentence is followed by support sentences that expand on the topic. And you want to present these sentences in a logical order to support or expand what you say in the first topic sentence. Don't forget that you need to support all statements containing information with in-text references. These support sentences are the nuts and bolts of your paragraph that you bookend firstly with a topic sentence and lastly with a concluding sentence that summarises the main points. You can use these bookends to link the paragraphs together. This makes your essay flow really well. For your reader, it's the difference between eating lovely smooth chocolate or a gritty dessert with lots of lumps and bumps to chew. So either use the topic sentence to link to the previous paragraph or the concluding sentence to link to the next paragraph. Okay, back to your essay spider plan. Once you have the legs of your spider lined up, you can start to insert the topic sentences, and these will come from the main points you identify from your notes. So go ahead and write in your topic sentences and then add in the evidence, which will eventually become the supporting sentences. You will then need to decide in what order these paragraphs will make sense, and to do this you can read the topic sentences and see in which order they tell the most logical story or make the most logical argument. Okay, let's just have a recap. On the slide we have a figure from your Writing in Psychology text. It's on page 62 entitled The Basic Steps to Writing a Good Essay. So let's just take a look and see where we're at. The first step, identify the essay topic. We've covered already, and that's your essay task. The second step, search the literature. You don't necessarily need to do this because you already have the background reading on self-determination theory, and you've chosen 3 out of the 5 empirical articles provided in the essay information. Step 3, review the literature. That's why you sat down and read the articles and compiled your notes on the information you find in the articles. That leads into step 4, draw up an outline of your findings, and then step 5, organise your findings, hopefully with a note to remind you which article and on what page you found the information. The next step 6 is to develop a list of key arguments, which brings us to what I discussed in the previous slide. That is that each of your key arguments becomes a paragraph in your essay. Then it's time in the next step, number 7, which is the blue circle in the middle, to write the first draft of the essay, including the body, introduction and conclusion. And here I would add that you probably want to start with either the body or your introduction, then move on to the conclusion. I strongly recommend you save the abstract until you've written everything else. And remember, the abstract is a précis of the main points that you include in the introduction, body and conclusion of your essay. Now we've stepped into the writing phase of your essay, I'm going to talk a little bit about writing for psychology. Now, students new to psychology often focus on APA formatting, in that it's how to set things out, in-text citations and the reference list. But if you look at chapter 2 in your Writing for Psychology textbook, you'll find that there's a whole lot more to the mechanics of writing in this style. I strongly urge you all to sink your teeth into this chapter and read it from start to finish before you embark on writing your first draft of your essay. I normally teach a 3rd year unit in psychology, and I can share with you that even in 3rd years, a great many students are still struggling with writing well. And this is a problem because it doesn't matter how much you understand the subject, how much critical thinking you can apply, and in turn, what brilliant ideas you might conjure. If you can't communicate this to your reader, then your ideas are lost, and as a student, your reader is your marker who cannot award you the appropriate marks for those ideas. One thing I will say is that writing is really, really hard and sometimes really, really painful. When working on my PhD, sometimes I would spend a whole day and I would only have 2 paragraphs to show for it. The information presented in Chapter 2 of your Writing for Psychology text will make writing easier because it contains a lot of APA rules that are good to know right from the beginning, and it also teaches you some important strategies to help you write clearly and concisely. Now, I don't want to spoon feed you here because I do want you all to read that chapter, but I will pick out some of the main errors I come across when marking third-year students' work. Let's take a look at active or passive voice. In other words, we could think about who is doing what in a sentence. In technical terms, your text says the active or passive voice relates to the way a sentence or phrase is structured. The active voice puts the actor or instigator before the verb, whereas the passive voice focuses on the acted on or recipient object. Okay, what does this mean? If we look at the sentence, the cat sat on the mat, we'll see that it's an active sentence because the focus is on the actor, i.e. the cat who is sitting on the mat. If we look at the next sentence, the mat was sat on, this is passive because the focus is on the mat, which is the recipient object of something sitting on it. In the first active sentence, we know who is doing what. The cat is sitting on the mat. Whereas in the second passive sentence, we don't really know who is doing the sitting. We just know that the mat is being sat on. So we can see that the passive sentence can omit the actor entirely, which in turn fails to identify who is doing what, and inevitably has less information than the active option. So as a rule of thumb, always try to write in an active voice, and your writing will be clearer and generally more informative. The next point I want to make is about the words we choose in our writing. A common mistake when we first embark on academic writing is to try to be too fancy or flash. I liken this to trying to run before we can walk. When I was first starting my academic journey, I thought I had to expand my vocabulary to include lots of fancy descriptive words and terminology. And I got all the way to 4th year honours until my supervisor pulled me up and asked me why I would use the word ubiquitous in place of a simpler word such as common, which has the same meaning. I didn't really have an answer other than I just thought it sounded fancier, and a reason I felt a bit silly explaining to my supervisor. At this point, my supervisor introduced me to a little book called On Writing Well by a chap by the name of William Zinser. I took the book, read it cover to cover, and over the next 2 weeks completely rewrote my almost completed honours thesis, implementing all the writing wisdom that I had gleaned in that book, which was basically how to write simply, clearly and concisely without any pompous fluff and bluster. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you can Google the title On Writing Well and access a PDF copy of this incredibly helpful writing gem. One tip I can give you to avoid a pompous writing style is to try and write how you speak. And you can check this by always reading your work aloud. And I don't mean reading aloud in your head, but aloud so that everyone, if anyone else is listening, can hear it. If the words sound weird to you, you are probably not writing simply how you would speak. On page 11, William Zinsser gives us an example of how he edited his work to simplify. You could see how he has deleted words that add nothing to the meaning, and in doing so, his sentences are tighter and their meaning clearer. Until we get the paragraph, and I quote, "The writer must therefore constantly ask himself, what am I trying to say? Surprisingly often he doesn't know. Then he must look at what he has written and ask, have I said it? Is it clear to someone encountering the subject for the first time? If it's not, it's because some fuzz has worked its way into the machinery. The clear writer is a person clear-headed enough to see this stuff for what it is, fuzz." The last point I'm going to make about keeping your writing simple is to not let it get clogged up with waffle and superfluous words. This basically requires you to avoid any clutter coming into your writing, clutter that can take the form of words or phrases that sneak into your work undetected if you're not paying attention to them. For example, a common clutter word is personally. In the sentence, I don't personally know, the word brings no additional meaning to the sentence, only clutter. Another clutter word is interestingly, often placed at the beginning of a sentence. You have to ask yourself, why would you use this word? Because if it's not interesting in your essay, you shouldn't really be saying it. Your Writing for Psychology text gives a few examples under the section on superfluity on page 38. One of these examples is owing to the fact that, when we could otherwise just say the word because. And the other expression, give consideration to, when we could just say the word consider. Sentence length. I'm not going to say too much here, only that please keep your sentences reasonably short with a single idea to each. Long sentences make your work harder to understand because they often introduce competing ideas, and also by the time your reader has got to the end of a long sentence, they have forgotten what you may have said at the beginning. A common way of falling into this habit of writing long sentences is what we call run-on sentences. This is where writers join a string of ideas separated by commas to form one long sentence that would be better written as separate sentences. Please avoid doing this in your writing. If you read your work aloud and find that you're out of breath and have turned blue by the time you get to the end of your sentence, your sentence is definitely too long. I could talk about writing style until the cows come home, but I'm not going to because it's actually time for me to go and feed the cows. So in terms of your APA formatting, I'm going to refer you to Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 of your textbook, Interactive Approach to Writing Essays and Reports in Psychology. Now the 5th edition covers APA 7, whereas previous editions of the text cover previous iterations of APA formatting. Therefore, I strongly recommend you use the 5th edition of this text to avoid confusion between APA 7 and, for example, APA 6, because some of the formatting rules changed a couple of years ago. If you hop over to the Assessments tile, you'll see under the Psychological Essay Resources, I've provided an APA 7 annotated student paper and also an essay template Word document. The annotated student paper is a good example of how you should format your essay. This document aligns with a good essay example in your Writing for Psychology text on page 74. But please note there's a difference between student papers and professional papers. You should format your essay according to student paper convention. The template for Word is a really helpful document where you can write your essay in the appropriate sections, and a lot of the formatting for margins, headings and font appropriate for APA 7 are already created for you. A word of warning though, if you copy and paste from another Word document, you need to do a special paste unformatted text into the APA template, otherwise you risk importing other formatting styles to the document. That's all I'm going to say about APA formatting here, because you've got a lot of information in your text and the annotated student paper and templates I've provided for you. Alright, let's go back to the basic essay steps figure in your text for another recap. I've talked about the Writing for Psychology, and let's assume you've now written for your first draft of your essay, and that was step 7. As you've been writing, hopefully you've compiled your in-text citations and the reference list as you go along. That way you don't have to come back to it later and try to recall where you found the information that you've used in your essay. And that process in the figure is step 8. The next 4 steps, 9, 10, 11 and 12, are often neglected in student assignments. And as a marker, this is very apparent because although the essay presents key points and sometimes a strong argument, the finished product just simply is just not finished. That is, it's not polished. The writing still contains spelling and grammar errors and remains clunky to read. Sometimes the essay structure doesn't flow, so the reader has to go back and forth to try and decipher what the student is trying to say. I cannot over-egg the importance of the steps, that is to proofread and revise your essay, polish your writing again, and then proofread again. Then take a step back and cross-check that the in-text citations match with the reference list. They should match up so that all the in-text citations are included in the reference list, and vice versa. The reference list should not include articles that you have not cited in your writing. I would then go back and proofread your essay again. Get someone else to read it. Does it make sense to them? Your proofreader doesn't have to be an academic. I used to badger my dad in Scotland to proofread my essays, and he did right up until my PhD, at which point I think he'd had enough, and my poor patient husband had to take up the reins. What I'm saying is ask anyone who can read. If you've written your essay clearly, the content should be interesting and accessible to most people. Once you've done with proofreading, it's time to write the title page. This should be fairly straightforward for you because the title page is included in the APA 7 Word template. I'll just repeat the point again that in APA 7 the student papers are different from the professional papers, particularly on some of the title page details. Then over we go to writing your abstract, which is a short summary of your essay. This should be concise but comprehensive so that your reader can quickly grasp the essence of your essay. Often people read the abstract to decide whether they're going to read the full article, so it needs to be brief but informative. As a rule of thumb, I tend to make my abstract roughly 10% of the essay word count. In this case, that would be 150 words. And the textbook includes a list of key components generally included in an abstract. So your hard work is nearly complete with just one final proofread to go. Go ahead and make a nice cup of tea or something else you would prefer and sit yourself down and slowly read through your work. It's amazing how after all those initial proofreads, there is generally one or two tweaks you can make to improve your essay. Now it's time to submit your essay. But before doing this, you need to put it through the Turnitin program in the submission portal. This way you can check that you have not inadvertently used the same phrase, sentence or even paragraph as previous written works. If the similarity check highlights any of your writing, you can fix this up before you make your final submission. Now notice the last box in the figure says hand in on time, and this is important for two reasons. Firstly, by handing your work in on time, you avoid overloading yourself with finishing your essay at the same time as trying to keep up with the unit content and at the end of the trimester revision for your final exam. So think of handing your essay in on time as being a very generous gift to your future study self. The second reason is that there are a lot of you in the class, and that means there's a lot of essays to mark. Now I've got a brilliant marking team ready for your essays next month, and we've allocated the time to mark the essays and provide constructive feedback on your work. If too many essays come in late, a lot of the marking team may already have moved on to their next contracts, which will then put pressure on the one or two markers I might have left to do the work. So that's just a unit coordination logistical ask from me that if you can, and I understand that this is not always possible because life things get in the way sometimes, but if you can, please try to submit your essay on the due date. Okay, where to go for help? I've already talked about the Academic Skills Office at UNE in my welcome lecture. They're there to help you develop your study skills, write your assignments, improve your referencing and prepare for exams. If you are struggling with any of your learning skills, then please go ahead and reach out to these really helpful people. You can find the link in Moodle on the information tile under Academic Skills tab. Alternatively, I've provided a link here on the slide. You can also find help from your fellow students or from me on the discussion forum. As we're now strongly focusing on this assignment, I'll create a specific essay discussion forum in the welcome tile at the top of the home page. That way we can keep the essay discussion separate from other Psych 101 discussion business. If you have a specific question about the essay for me, please make sure you post it on the discussion forum so that everyone else can benefit from my response. Another source of help, of course, is your prescribed text, an interactive approach to writing essays and research reports in psychology. I've stressed this throughout this lecture, but I want to stress it again. This guide is your friend in Psych 101, where you write an essay, and again it's your friend in Psych 102, where you will write a research report. Lastly, if it all falls apart and you're really struggling to cope, either with your study or some other life event or ongoing situation, we have an excellent counselling service here at UNE. And I want to stress this service is free to all students studying here. So if you need to, please reach out and use this support service. That's what it's there for. So that concludes all I wanted to say today to help prepare you to write your psychological essay in Psych 101. Try to enjoy learning about self-determination theory and how you might apply that to your studies in this unit and beyond in whatever academic path you choose to take. Once you've completed your essay and submitted it for marking, Give yourself a big pat on the back and reward yourself with something enjoyable. For me, that's mostly a walk in nature, as I find this very restorative. Most evenings I take myself up to visit these bovine folk on the hill. Rosie, Ruby, and the little black Dexter is Reggie. He's only 1.5 years old, but I don't think he's going to grow much bigger than small. But that's not through a lack of enthusiasm for his grain each night. Okay, over and out. I look forward to receiving your amazing essays next month.